Good evening, everyone. I would like to call to order this meeting of the Cunningham Township Board for Monday, February 10th, 2025. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Wu. Here. Trustee Evans. Trustee Hersey.
Here.
Trustee Colasetti.
Here.
Trustee Bishop.
Here.
Trustee Wilkin.
Here.
Trustee Quisenberry.
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Present.
Supervisor Chenoweth.
Present.
Assessor Owana.
Here.
We have quorum. Next item on the agenda is approval of minutes from the November 12th, 2024 meeting. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Chandra. Any substantial corrections? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
That was an aye. Okay. Those minutes are approved. Additions to the agenda? We'll move on to public participation. I don't see anyone in the audience. Does anyone have written communication? Okay. We'll move on to closed session. So we'll need a motion to go into closed session per 5 ILCS 120/2C11 pending litigation.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Chandra. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Wu.
Yes.
Trustee Hersey.
Yes.
Trustee Colasetti.
Yes.
Trustee Bishop.
Yes.
Trustee Wilkin.
Yes.
Trustee Quisenberry.
Yes.
That motion passes. And just a reminder to the public watching, we will be leaving this room, reconvening upstairs in closed session, and then we will come back and finish the rest of the meeting. And trustees on the phone will need to call in to the phone upstairs.
Okey doke. Okay.
Okay, I'd like to call us back into open session. Could I have a motion to do so, please?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Charisse. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Wu.
Yes.
Trustee Evans.
Yes.
Trustee Hersey.
Yes.
Trustee Colasetti.
Yes.
Trustee Bishop.
Yes.
Trustee Wilkin.
Yes.
Trustee Quisenberry.
Yes.
That motion passes. We'll move on to committee to verify bills.
Good evening. Just scrolling down. Okay. This last month, we from the town fund, we had $70,684.40 in expenditures. From the general assistance fund, we had $304,942.77. Our total expenditures for the month were $375,627.17. In the public packet is a list of the expenditures. I'm happy to answer any questions you have, and then I'll talk a little bit about the supervisor's memo.
Any questions on town fund or general fund? Okay. Is there a motion to put these on file or to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Grace. Any further discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Wu.
Yes.
Trustee Evans.
Yes.
Trustee Hersey.
Yes.
Trustee Colasetti.
Yes.
Trustee Bishop.
Yes.
Trustee Wilkin.
Yes.
Trustee Quisenberry.
Yes.
That motion passes. Supervisor's report and assessor's report.
Great. So I tried to highlight in yellow the things I'd like to point out. So the first is just I'm continuing to bring to your attention the record high number of calls for service. We're basically at pandemic level numbers of incoming phone calls. From January 5th to February 4th, we had 16,224 incoming calls to the supervisor's office only. Those happen evenings, weekends, daytime, It includes all of the calls in to all of the lines. Most of those are to the front desk. That does not include email or walk-ins. I meant to try to compile those numbers separately for you. I condensed the winter shelter update. I've been giving you a regular update on the winter shelter at the top of the memo. Basically, I let you know that we created a shelter and outreach committee of the continuum of service providers of the homeless last year. And it includes a number of folks from healthcare, emergency response, and transportation. We had a count of unsheltered residents in October of between 80 and 130 adults, and 13 literally homeless families. That was up to 17 in December. Nationwide, we've seen a 37% increase in homeless families and an 18% increase in homeless individuals, according to HUD in 2024. So our numbers are kind of mirror some of those national trends. We did shelter diversion, maximizing existing beds and expanding programs were our strategies of the committee. Our expanded winter programs included 21 new units between both townships of rapid rehousing for literally homeless families, which are all full. We opened a buddies program with our contractor Friend and Me and opened up 20 new beds for people receiving SSI, SSDI to buddy up and seek housing together. That got 20 people out of Strides. We created a public health winter emergency shelter with 21 nighttime cots, also staffed by Friend and Me through contract. That has been full pretty much the entire time. Those are dedicated cots for 21 folks referred from Strides. ROE started a Families Days program, and United Way is funding that. So that helped with families. The numbers are unknown. I don't have the latest. I know they met today, but I have not gotten the update from our staff member. I did want to, so that's not new to you. The new is the kind of the Arctic blast shelter expansion. So we ended up housing 36 people, including 17 children, on top of the numbers I've given you. With the winter storm approaching, we counted 5 individuals and 3 families. It ended up being more than that, but that was our count. We had 5 people turned away from Strides going into some of the coldest nights. 2 women and 3 men were turned away on January 2nd. So we went ahead and housed 17 additional households, 36 people, 17 of them children. We received funds, $5,500 in funds offered by City of Champaign. And we then also used angel donor contributions for the families. I wanted to give a snapshot of those supported because I think it's really important to understand what homelessness looks like going into winter. We're going to have another cold snap this week. We had a family at an Illinois terminal who were about to sleep overnight there and were asked not to. We had a crime victim with medical fragility at Strides who had bullets in their body. We had 2 senior women, one with a disability. The oldest was in her late 80s, sleeping at OSF in the emergency room. We had a 6-person family fleeing domestic violence who did not qualify for Courage Connection because the person was not stalking them here locally. We had a working mom with 4 children sleeping in their car. We had a domestic violence survivor and 2 children. We had a family of 3. We had a senior with medical fragility, and we had a man who slept outside Strides and was found nearly unresponsive in the morning. He was taken, he was found by one of our contractors at Friend and Me, taken to the ER, diagnosed with pneumonia, and is now in a hotel, case managed by Champaign County Healthcare Consumers. We're paying for that hotel. And Healthcare Consumers does not have a hotel program, just for the record, in case anybody wants to call them, they don't have a hotel program. But that was something that because he was so medically fragile and Healthcare Consumers has direct contact with Carle Hospital, we felt that that was the most appropriate way of handling a near-death situation. We're aware of other groups in town also providing emergency shelter, and we're working with RPC to gather the point-in-time count, which was done on January 22nd, to assess the numbers. So I don't have final numbers. I don't want to give you drafts because there's a lot of moving parts, but we are working on that. I also want to name deaths and hospitalizations. Cunningham Township is aware of 2 deaths due to exposure since January 1st of 2025. I referenced the attached news article. There are likely more as there's no coordinated tracking of deaths. So I have reached out to public health and the coroner to establish a better system to track deaths due to exposure to the elements. One of the deaths was in Ambucks Park, and I have confirmed that the person was homeless. The second death was in their house, and it was because the heat had been turned off, and they had no way to heat their house. The heat was probably off for a period of time because Ameren could not turn off heat in the middle of the winter, or they may have had propane or some other form of heat in their house. So at first I want to pause because that's a lot. This is not how I think we should handle homelessness in the winter. I think this is a triage that looks like a patchwork of services, and we're doing the best we can. But I do want to name that that's what it looks like. Is there any questions about winter shelter?
Chris?
Not so much about, thank you for the report. Can you give the statistic again of how many phone calls in what time period?
It's at the top of your memo.
Oh, okay, got it,
So
thank
it's
you.
January 5th to February 4th, so that's essentially a month. 16,225 incoming calls to the supervisor's office.
Thank you.
I would also like to specifically add regarding that, we often mistakenly get calls at the assessor's office, usually on average between 3 and 6 a day, that are looking for the supervisor's office, but they have accidentally called ours. So you can go ahead and tack on whatever that amount might be, the aggregate number of that. And that has been going on for months, not just since January or just since the winter. That happens regularly.
Grace?
Oops. Thank you for all the information and the work that your office continues to do, and I'm encouraged to see that you have other support, other organizations that you've been able to network with, and angel donors, and probably a broken record. I feel like I end up asking this most town board meetings, but what can we do to continue to support the efforts as town board, potentially in roles at the city and as members of the public?
So it needs to be understood that people sleeping outside is a public emergency that requires emergency response. And I would like to discuss with the mayors when an emergency is called, because currently emergency management and MTD, they can't function without it being called an emergency. So it's really important that we look at what other communities do and what we are doing and decide when are we calling that. So like Red Cross services, emergency management services, all of these things don't really kick in even when it's an Arctic blast and it's 16 below and there are people sleeping outside strides because there's no other place for them to go. So there's like common sense would say this is an emergency, but actually the structure that we have around emergency management is not accommodated because homelessness is not considered an emergency, even though it's a life and death situation. And I haven't explored the details of this because we've been chasing our tails to provide the services. I have spoken with emergency management, I've spoken with public health, and I think that, I think we need to just get through this winter. And then I think the next thing is to really look at like what are the services that can be organized around this? Secondly, it's a public health emergency and it's a healthcare emergency. And we have 2 hospitals in the community, and places like Peoria have really tight relationships with their hospitals. And OSF actually funds homeless services in Peoria. And there are other models in which the hospitals are much more engaged in homeless services because the bottom line for them, even if they were to not care about the human beings, which they're healthcare providers, and I certainly assume they do, there's also a financial incentive for them to keep folks out of the emergency room and rotate through and have very expensive procedures that may not be covered through other insurance, et cetera. So I think really developing a relationship with the healthcare providers, and we've been trying to do that with the Outreach and Shelter Committee. It is absolutely 100% essential that Strides remain open as our only low-barrier shelter in the community. We live in Urbana, so we will not be voting on this, but there is a referendum in Champaign on April 5th about whether or not to fund Strides. Strides gets, the city of Cunningham Township gets less than a seventh of the tax levy amount per kind of person. Their taxing levy is less than a seventh of Cunningham Township. And there's historic reasons for that. But basically for the cost of a dinner out in Champaign once a year, Champaign residents can make sure that our entire community has a low barrier shelter. And I do believe that both cities should be involved in supporting making sure there's a low barrier shelter. Now, a low barrier shelter needs to be the low barrier shelter. And if there are people in the shelter who could move into housing, whether they're receiving SSI, SSDI, they're senior citizens who could qualify for housing authority, it's really important that we basically that it be the emergency shelter for folks and that they're not folks who have other options staying there long term, and they need case management and support to do that. And I think Strides has been really working on making sure that people don't die and not really having enough time and capacity to address some of those case management needs. So Cunningham Township has stepped in, and we basically have moved dozens of people out of Strides and are helping them move into independent housing, and we have success stories every day. So that is funded through one-time SMAS funding, which is IDHS funding that comes through the Municipal Mayor's Council, that goes to the City of Champaign, that comes to us. So that is what is funding the winter expansion of shelter, and so it's very much appreciated. The state has let us know that the budget will be tight this year, so that's the news we're receiving, is that it will be a tighter budget. Certainly there's a lot of political uncertainty at the national level. I would say chaos, lack of ethics, insanity, whatever word you want to call it. But basically that will also have implications for us as well. So I think we are really kind of moving to a city-state kind of governance nationally, and I think cities are even more important than they ever were before in looking at their mission and related to all of the kind of needs of their constituents. And I think homeless prevention is key. So being able to invest in rental assistance to make sure people stay in housing, and then making sure we partner in supporting our only low barrier shelter in the community, which I know Urbana has been very generous with ARPA dollars, is going to be important. And then I think us, making sure that we really understand that, the life of a person who is unhoused in our community is equal to the life of a student, is equal to the life of a professional, is equal to the life of a council member or a township supervisor. It actually is like a pretty important value shift that we need to make as a society, to understand that every single person's life is valuable, that everybody is somebody's daughter or son, and everybody has friends and relationships and value, and the people we work with are absolutely and utterly delightful human beings. Sense of humor and grace, and you will never meet people who are more resilient than the people we work with at Township. They could teach all of us something. I think just in terms of updates, I put the rest in yellow. I don't have a lot more to add, except I do want to say that the community has been very generous with the Angel Donor Fund, and it's been able to, it's a loaves and fishes kind of moment. As soon as we think we're out of gas, it's like, a $10,000 check shows up. So I just really appreciate this community. 100% of the Angel Donor Fund goes to meet people's direct material needs. And then I just want to point you to the piece by Luke Taylor in the News Gazette called "She Was Somebody's Child, Somebody's Friend." And this is a participant who passed away in Ambucks Park. And I think it's just really important for us to lift up her story and what she's been through and understand, you know, that I think with more services and support in the community, she would still be alive. And it's been pretty devastating to our staff. She's not, we also lost a veteran on Saturday who's in our program as well. So it's been tough for Township.
Any other questions? Move on to new business.
All right. Okay, so I apologize for the stark tone shift moving into this new business. But to continue on, what this resolution is specifically asking for tonight is your approval with my purchasing of a valuation program. This program is by the company CoreLogic. Marshall and Swift is listed on there. It is a company that they bought out, but they do still use the name. So if I happen to use those interchangeably, they represent the same company. But the product that I am specifically, or that I have specifically purchased was Swift Estimator. And CoreLogic is a company that Cunningham Township Assessor's Office has used at least since I've worked here, which is going on 6 years tomorrow. This is just the newest version of their valuation program. And so the reason that I had contacted most of the town board members to at least give you a little bit of detail about my purchasing of this product prior to tonight's meeting was because at our last international conference, myself and my colleague Tanmay had built a working relationship with a representative from CoreLogic, and he had since given Tanmay a demo of this program while we were at the conference. I then received a demo the following month, which would have been September of 2024, and then everyone in our office received a demo in October. And then sometime between the beginning of November and Thanksgiving, CoreLogic was kind enough to let us have a 2-week free trial period with this program. And what this program is, as I mentioned, automated valuation. We do have a computer-assisted, computer automated mass appraisal system that is separate from this valuation program, just so I can clear that up. The CAMA system, those 4 words that I just mentioned, computer automated mass appraisal, that is more representative of keeping the data. We can use it for valuations, and we have been previously using it for valuations, but the cost schedules with which we were founding that program, entering into that program, are from the Illinois Department of Revenue and have not been updated since January of 2020. And I'm sure we're all familiar with what happened in March of 2020 in that year, and those cost schedules are not representative of any sort of COVID or post-COVID market. And so because of this, what this Swift Estimator program does, not only does it help us add more customizations to the properties, therefore therefore allowing for more accurate data, more accurate assessments. But it also has updated cost schedules from the most recent year of 2024. So that would be then, what these cost schedules represent is essentially a price per unit of everything that we have to include in an assessment. And so some items that could include but are not limited to are square footage of a living area. It could be regarding the the exterior material that the property is made out of. So let's say you have a house that's made out of vinyl versus a house made out of brick. Those would have a different price per unit on those cost schedules. And so we want to have the most updated cost schedules possible. And although the one from the Illinois Department of Revenue will suffice, it is much more appropriate and accurate and would lead us to have more accurate assessments to be able to use this updated cost schedule within this program. And additionally, like I said, being able to have that higher level of customization and add more details allows us to get more accurate assessments. And so ultimately, what more accurate assessments allow for, since as I'm sure you all are aware, we have a lot of inequity within our jurisdiction, and specifically among residential properties, we have a lot of inequity. That is something that I'm trying to minimize, and specifically if I get reelected, this is hopefully a longer term project. We're only on year 1 right now, as that's how long the contract lasts. But essentially, this contract, which the clerk does have a physical copy of, and I can email to anybody if you would like. But what this contract does say in it is that for the price of $5,499, what we're going to get included is the ability to complete 2,400 residential valuations through the program. CoreLogic refers to them as transactions. It means the same thing as valuation for our purposes tonight. So if you hear me use those words, they are synonymous tonight. So like I said, 2,400 residential parcels and then 25 commercial parcels. And that was not a number that was just chosen out of the blue. It was specifically chosen by me after we have conducted a 3-year neighborhood study, as well as received data on a 3-year neighborhood study from the county assessor. And what that shows is, what that 3-year data is representative of for the sake of the valuation program is it showed us the neighborhoods with the highest coefficient of dispersion. And once again, just without using assessor jargon for our purposes of tonight, what that means is we were then able to organize the neighborhoods by the extremeness of the inequities that the neighborhoods might have. And so we were able to determine what the top neighborhoods were that had the highest levels of inequity. And I don't believe that we have any sort of uniform classification among this township board and my office for what neighborhoods specifically, what boundaries those are. But if anybody would like, I can send you a map of the borders of our neighborhoods. But for reference, it's neighborhoods 2, 3, 4, 14, and then all new construction, residential new construction from 2024. And so that's going to cover, as I said, 2,400 parcels. We have about 11,000 and some change in our jurisdiction. And so it's going to be about a quarter or so of the parcels that would get covered within this first year of having this program. Ultimately, what I hope to do if I get reelected and for a longer term project is to get all of our parcels, both residential, commercial, industrial, everything that actually has an assessed value through this program over the term of the next 4 years. And what the goal would ultimately be would be aiming to prevent assessments from increasing at the rate that they specifically have been over the last few years since the pandemic. I'm sure you all are aware that there is a county equalization factor, commonly referred to as the multiplier, that gets added on to the assessed value that the township sends to the county each year. And you know, it's a significant increase in people's property taxes, and I do recognize that. I recognize the need to specifically work on decreasing that multiplier because over the last 3 to 4 years, it seems to have increased by about 1 to 1.5%. And that's just within the last couple of years of the COVID market. We are in some of the most unprecedented economic times we've ever had, and it concerns me that if we don't do something now, that rate might continue at that same 1 to 1.5% rate, or even worse, increasing further. So what I aim to do with using this program in my office is over time to get more accurate assessments, which would theoretically decrease the amount of inequities that we have per neighborhood, and then that subsequently lowers the coefficient of dispersion, ultimately representing that neighborhoods are more equal in value for like properties. And so what that does then, although I do not determine the multiplier number, that's determined by the county, that number is evidenced by the numbers within Cunningham Township, the assessed values of Cunningham Township. So the less inequity that we have, the more equality that we have with these particular properties, then theoretically the multiplier could either lower or at least not increase at the rate that it has been historically. And we may not see a significant decrease in the multiplier within a single calendar year, specifically because we only have the ability to financially cover, like I said, about a quarter of these properties right now within the agreement that I have signed. But over time, like I said, that goal should ultimately be to get all of those properties through this updated program with these updated cost schedules to get those more accurate assessments. And just to explain a little bit more, the reason why I did sign this contract in advance of tonight's meeting, although I did contact everybody and spoke with the lawyers in advance just to make sure that that was okay to do, which it was. The reason for that was that we had been talking with our CoreLogic representative since effectively since August, but specifically for this deal since November. And unfortunately, until January 1st, considering that's a critical point in terms of reassessments, I did not know the full scope of the township's needs for 2025 until January 1st of 2025. And so I didn't want to tell our representative, hey, I need 1,000 parcels of this, when in reality I could have gotten a better deal and also gotten 1,500 parcels. So that kind of delayed the process in getting this in the first place. And then in addition to that, CoreLogic's headquarters is in LA, so unfortunately our representative was affected by the wildfires when we did actually get back in touch right after the holiday. As you know, that happened around January 6th or 7th. So that then delayed us by another about 2 weeks or so to signing that contract. And then eventually we got towards the end of the month, and just considering that this had been on the table for so long and our representative is not the boss at this particular company, he basically said, hey, you have until the end of the month to sign this, or otherwise I can't give you the same deal that was on the table, because we are getting a significant deal for this $5,500. In reality, this price per unit of each of these transactions would have cost us in total between $7,000 and $8,000, which the township would not have been able to afford in fiscal year 25 had we not gotten the specific deal with our representative. So in order for me to secure that deal for the township and get started with this project a year earlier than originally intended, I did go ahead and sign that, letting all of you know, speaking with our lawyers. So I believe that I did answer most people's questions when we all had originally called, but if you all have any tonight, please feel free to let me know.
Grace.
Thank you. Sorry, this is for a 1-year agreement, is that right?
Yes, it is. And just to clarify, even if I were not to be the assessor somehow, although I am running unopposed and nobody else is qualified in this particular jurisdiction, it would be that the next assessor would still be able to use any remaining transactions that we had left.
And then the item for tonight, this resolution, is to enter into a contract with them.
So I have already signed that contract just because of the deal, but yes, that is what we are voting on tonight. It's basically the approval of this, but this was already in the correct budget line, which is computer services and software. The money was still available for it within that budget line. And like I did mention, I did speak with the lawyers just to ensure that it was appropriate and legal for me to have signed this contract in advance of tonight's meeting, and they assured me that it was.
Thank you.
Mary Alice.
I would like to suggest that we add something to this resolution that specifies in the now therefore it be resolved that we authorize the township assessor to purchase a valuation program which covers 2,400 parcels and 25 commercial properties for the year, whatever the term is. It just gives it a little bit more context.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
In the terms of what, January 31st, 2025 to January 30th, 2026, is that correct?
I believe so. I would have to look at that one more time, but I believe that that should be correct, yes.
Would you like to make a motion to that effect?
Yeah, I'll move that we, approve resolution number T 2025-02002R, resolution authorizing the Cunningham Township assessor to purchase a valuation program with Marshall and Swift CoreLogic, with the addition of, in the now therefore it be resolved, that it includes 2,400 residential parcels and 25 commercial parcels from January 31st, 2025 to January 30th, 2026, if you can confirm those numbers.
So it actually says that we are able to terminate at any time. So I would say that in this particular instance, I don't know if you would like to particularly end that date on the date that my assessor term is supposed to end, just considering that I have not officially been reelected yet. But it does go for a year, so.
I just put it for a year.
Yeah.
I mean, other people can disagree.
Is there a second?
Oh, second.
Second.
Discussion. Grace.
I would recommend maybe we just reference the ordinance or the agreement, as in the attached agreement. I guess that's what I was asking for, is how I'm kind of typically aware of,
Agreement says confidential. You can't publish it.
Oh, we're not putting the agreement in. Okay.
Yeah, that's why.
So yes, then January 30th, I believe, works fine in that instance, since the next assessor, regardless of whether or not it's me, would still be able to have access to any remaining transactions within the program.
Call the roll.
Trustee Wu,
Yes.
Trustee Evans,
Yes.
Trustee Hersey,
Yes.
Trustee Colasetti,
Yes.
Trustee Bishop,
Yes. Yes.
Trustee Wilkin,
Yes.
Trustee Quisenberry,
Yes.
That motion passes. And with no further business before the Cunningham Town Board, we stand adjourned. And this meeting will be followed by a regular meeting of the Urbana City Council.